started in 97, just three friends with a dream. For one band we started, things weren't as they seemed. Streetteam Berlin was born, a passion took hold. Now we're a company with a story untold.
This is Dax from Streetteam Berlin On Air. How are you?
Hi, it's Blackie.
Hi, Blackie. Nice to talk to you. Thanks for giving us a call, and thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you.
Great talking to you again. I actually had the pleasure of talking to you once before, exactly 15 years ago when you were playing in Dublin. I was the receptionist.
Oh, wow.
I was the receptionist who checked you into the hotel. So that's how we find our way to each other again. So it's really cool to get the opportunity to have a chat with you. And I have a few questions here that our listeners and some fans sent to us that they asked if I could go ahead and ask you, because they're just really interested and really looking forward to hearing what your view is on certain points, and of course how you prepare for your upcoming concert in Berlin, because it's going to be the kickoff for the European Tour here in the Berlin concert. So that's going to be pretty cool. But one of the questions was actually about the W.A.S.P legacy. So W.A.S.P has had a huge impact on the metal community and the metal world. How do you personally define the band's legacy?
Ooh. Those sort of questions, I'll be honest, I always say that that's up to the listener.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like somebody saying, what do you want on your tombstone when you die? It's like, it's difficult to say, because you never see yourself like the world does anyway.
Yeah.
So looking at it, from that perspective, like I said, I always like to take the ball and push it back towards the fan base and say, you're going to get a better answer from them than you would me.
Okay, and that's actually a great answer. And the idea when you're playing here in Berlin, I'll actually be at the concert as well. So maybe I can ask a few fans there as well and do a little bit of a fan questioning.
Sure.
Like when you look back at the early days of W.A.S.P, what was the moment, or what moment stands out where you knew that we made it, we're there?
I don't know if any artist ever really arrives at that until a point way further down the line than you might think.
So it's one of those, I'm there and didn't realize when it actually happened, kind of.
No, I wouldn't say that. What it is when you're building a career.
Yeah.
To give you an example, when we first started, one of the first questions we would hear was, so, how long do you think the band is going to last? And we had just gotten started. I mean, we were on the first album.
Yeah.
And my response to them was, hey, we just got here. I have no idea, if we're going to be around in 5 years. I don't know if we're going to be around in 5 months.
Yeah.
It's like, you can't make that. You have, again, that's up to the fan base. No one can make that decision. But I would say this, that for any artist, because if you're smart, you never really get comfortable with what you're doing. You always realize that you have to stay ahead. You have to continue to work hard. You've heard the old expression, it's harder to stay there than it is to get there in the first place.
Yeah.
And it really is true. So at this point in my career, I would say that maybe what you're suggesting has only just recently happened.
Okay, wow, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, because, like I said, if you're smart, you never really get comfortable.
Yeah.
And you have to really pay attention to make sure that what you're doing is correct, that you're working hard, that you're doing the best shows you can do, you're making the best albums you can make, things like that. So, I'm at a point in my career right now where, let's say, any band that can make it 20 years, that's less than 1/10 of 1% that's ever been in this business will ever do.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah.
But to do it further than that, it's almost impossible. So, but even that it never gives you the right to put your feet up and say, "Oh, I'm here, I've arrived, everybody's going to love me," and no. It doesn't. I don't think it works like that.
No,
I think you have to continue to work hard.
Yeah, that's when it goes downhill. Then when you let your guard down.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you get too comfortable.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, no, that's actually a really, really cool way of looking at it. So, yeah, I'm a musician myself, so.
This is what we do is not a right; it's a privilege.
Yeah. Exactly. I fully agree, and I see that every day. Like when I do a radio show or when I do interviews with legends like yourself. It's not a job; it's a privilege, and I feel very lucky to be here. But yeah, always what you're doing is never good enough. You can always do better, kind of, and push yourself. Awesome. Right. You always have to be setting that bar higher. Yeah. Speaking of setting the bar higher, so the creative process behind for example your debut album, how do you think your approach to songwriting has evolved since then? Well, songwriting is a craft, like any other business, any other job, and you get better at it as you do it. But songwriting is, I think, the most mysterious of all the arts. Because when you watch a painter paint, you watch him every time he puts a stroke on the canvas. Or when someone is a sculptor, you watch him mold that clay with his hands, and you see it unfold right before your eyes. Yeah. When someone writes music, it's almost like a magic trick, we pull a rabbit out of the hat, and we pull it out of thin air. Yeah. And to the general public, it's the most mysterious of all the arts. Because they cannot see it happen. Yeah. All they know is that it was not there, and now it is there. Yeah. And they don't know how we make that happen. So it's it always puts a smile on my face because as a writer, you can see it in your head. Yeah. But for someone who doesn't have that ability, it's very, very hard for them to imagine that. So like I said, it's it really is. It's a craft like anything else, and you get better at it as you go along. It's interesting because I actually see it similarly as a guitarist. When I look at my guitar at home, I always think there's a lot of songs in that guitar, and it's up to me to get them out. I've thought that a million times. Yeah, and it actually works. It's true. It's a part of your soul and your heart and your passion that comes out. Well, I'll take it a step further. It's not just all the songs that you can write. It's all the songs that have been written on that guitar. Yeah. That have ever existed. The Stairways to Heaven, The Smoke on the Waters, all those, they're all there. Past, present, and future, and it's up to us to find them. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That is actually taking it a step further, and yeah, that's actually very, very true and very cool. Now, I already mentioned, you're starting the European tour here in Berlin. With the 40th anniversary tour, it brought a huge wave of nostalgia. So how did it feel reconnecting with fans after so many years? Well, it was strange because we hadn't done that album in 40 years. Yeah. And I wasn't sure how well it was going to work. And that might sound naive, but, when you do a number of albums over your career, you effectively, when you put a set list together to do a tour, it becomes a best of type show. To have any one
single album go up against the best of what you've done over your career. It's very, very difficult for a single record to go up against that.
Yeah.
And to have a single record do that and succeed, that's very, very gratifying.
I can imagine.
And but like I said, I wasn't sure that it was going to work when we first started doing it, but I've been pleasantly surprised, and the reactions have been spectacular.
Yeah, I heard that the South American tour actually went really cool and very well, and that the feedback and how the fans approached it was awesome. So I've only heard positive about it. I have actually a question from one of our listeners from South Africa, from Johannesburg, Daryl. He's asking. Well, he knows a couple of extremely wicked and very, very cool acoustic versions that you've done. Is there a plan to bring like an unplugged album out, or why hasn't one come out yet?
Well, first and foremost, we're a rock band.
Correct.
You know, there is a place for acoustic stuff. You know, I mean, if you look at the Crimson Idol, it's sprinkled all throughout that album. Mm-hmm. But to try to sit and think, you know, would I do something like that? It's never really crossed my mind, to be honest with you, because, like I said, we're a rock band first and foremost. Yeah. You know, so, but you never say never. Yeah. You know, down the line, something, you know, if I get a good idea and I feel strong enough about it, then yeah. Yeah, okay. But for the, you know, at this moment, nothing that I can think of.
It's not in the books at the moment.
No.
But are there any new W.A.S.P songs or projects in the work that you could potentially maybe tease for us a little bit?
Well, we started working on stuff a couple of years ago for a new album, but, you know, COVID happened, and then, you know, when we were on tour in Europe 2 years ago, you know, when my back got broken, you know, we had to go through all that, and so, you know, those plans all got put on the back burner because, you know, with all the touring and everything we're doing, you know, the schedule's been pretty intense, so will there be new music at some point? Yes, there will be.
Awesome.
But when, I can't tell you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, but that's very cool to hear, and I think our listeners and fans, they're going to be very excited to hear that as well. Now, with the touring, do you find that the touring more meaningful or more challenging now than, for example, in the earlier days?
I would think it's about the same.
Okay.
You know, I really... you know, like what we just did in South America, there's a lot of flying involved. Yeah. You know, so that's not a lot of fun. But, you know, once you're there and you actually get to the shows, that, you know, we've been blessed in the sense that it's as good now as it was, you know, when we first started. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that's very gratifying.
Yeah, and kind of attaching to this question, a very close friend of mine who's a massive W.A.S.P fan, he's asking, compared to the earlier days, I mean, touring is exhausting. What do you do on a daily basis when you're out on the road to keep yourself fit, to keep yourself going, to keep yourself physically and mentally going and pushing, and as you said before, always try to be the better version of what you have done before?
Well, the first thing you really have to do is take care of yourself, you know, and make sure that you're fit enough to do the things you need to do. You know, I've been pretty blessed, you know, that my physical makeup and my body is pretty strong, and maybe stronger than most. So it's hard for me to compare myself to anybody else because all I know is me, you know. But when I compare myself to, when I look at what I've done versus what maybe some other people have done, I can see that, you know, physical strength has got a lot to do with it. Yeah. You know, so that certainly helps a lot. You know, to be able to sing like I do, you know, and still sound the same now. Actually, I'm better now than I was in the beginning. You know, so all those things make a big difference. And you asked about the mental part of it. That all goes back to the whole idea, that if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of truth to that. And it's just, I cannot imagine not doing this. So, as long as, I can physically do this, I'm going to keep doing it.
Perfect. Yeah, that was a question that was very dear to my friend Roland, because he's like he's a fitness and bodybuilder, and he's just of course that was a question that was interesting for him. Coming to like past present, like how do you reconcile the darker, more controversial aspects of your early music with who you actually are today?
Well, it's just, no one is one-dimensional. Mm-hmm. We've got many, many different sides of us. And songs or albums in general, they're little snapshots of who you are and where you are in your life at that moment. Mm-hmm. What you're thinking, what you're feeling, or at least it should be. And if you're making records based on that, then those are the most true records that you can make. So when somebody says, well, this is dark, or a song is dark, I don't really look at it that way. To me, it was just like, okay, well, this is what I was thinking at the moment. This was what I was feeling. If it's interpreted as being dark, well, then that's somebody's opinion. But, like I said, you're just trying to capture those little snapshots of who you are at that moment in your life when you're making that record.
Yeah. Yeah, the snapshots, that's, it is interesting. It's just a little, kind of a glimpse, window to the soul kind of situation.
If you don't do it like that, then you're not making honest records.
No, it's fake.
And that's the most honest way of doing it, is who are you at that moment?
Do what you want to do, not what people expect you to do.
Correct.
And throughout your career, what artists or bands influenced you the most, and do you hear actually your influence in today's rock or metal scene?
I don't really listen to a lot of I listen to music constantly, but I don't really listen to a lot of rock stuff. It's just when I'm going down the street and I listen to music when I'm in the car, and whatever's on the radio, that's what I'm listening to at the time. And I'll listen to country western, I'll listen to bluegrass, blues, you name it. I don't have a singular appetite when it comes to music. I have a pretty wide variety of things, and like most musicians, we'll tell you there's only two kinds of music, good and bad, and it really is true, so, we don't discriminate when it comes to that.
Oh, not at all. Like, if I think back, my first concert that I ever went to was MC Hammer. So, and from MC,
there you go.
From MC Hammer, I went into heavy metal and hard rock and everything. So, and I still dig it. I'm proud that I went there, and I'm happy that I saw him. And yeah, I do still listen to the music once in a while. But yeah, I still also know that my heart belongs to rock and metal. But speaking of all the musicians, what advice would you give young musicians who are trying to break it into the rock or metal scene today? Because of course today it's a lot more complicated and a lot more challenging to get into it because of the internet, because of unfortunately also artificial intelligence plays a big role in a lot of music. Is there any advice that you would give young aspiring bands who are trying to make it?
Well, show business you don't choose it, it chooses you. And if you don't think you can live without it, then go for it. Try.
Yeah.
But if you think for one moment that you can live without this, you should sincerely seek another line of employment, because you will not make it.
Okay.
So, like I said, it chooses you. You don't choose it.
Okay. Yeah. It's a tough world, and it's a tough.
Because everybody wants things, but few people are willing to pay the price that goes along with must.
Yeah.
You know, there's a big difference between wanting something and must having. And if you're one of those people that must have it, then there is no substitute. And because, like I said, everybody in life, everybody wants, but few are willing to pay the price that goes along with must. And that's a huge price a lot of times.
Yeah.
But like I said, it all comes down to how badly someone wants it. And in my particular case, like I said, I didn't choose it. It chose me. You know, it's almost like I get up in the morning and I put the shoes on, and the shoes do the walking. I'm just going along for the ride. I mean, it really is. It really is that serious.
Yeah. It's brilliant. I mean, it's awesome how you're saying that and how you're making it visual for our listeners, and how you can actually imagine, like I'm going to put my shoes on differently tomorrow morning. Like it's true. So yeah, thanks for
but
that.
The shoes are going to do the walking. Like I said, you're just the spectator.
Yeah, exactly. No, before it was like I'm controlling the shoes, but no, they're doing the walking. It's brilliant. And like looking at your career in the future, how would you like Blackie Lawless to be remembered?
Well, that goes back to the first question you asked me.
Yeah.
You know, again, I would defer to the fan base for that, because that's not for me to say.
And with the fans, like the fans who have stuck with you throughout the decades, if there's one thing that you could say to those fans who've stuck with you since the beginning, what would it be?
Simply thank you. You know, I mean, I would hope that, you know, that I've done material or done music that has moved them, but more importantly, if there's one thing that I've said throughout my career about the music that I've done, it was designed to get people to think for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's done that, then I've been successful.
Yeah.
And if it hasn't, then I've missed the mark. So to me, that's the most important thing. Did I do something that provoked thought?
Yeah.
You know, that's for me, the most important.
Yeah, true. Like make people think about what they just experienced, what they just saw, what they just heard.
Sure.
Yeah, I think we're almost up with the time, because I think I told with Michael that we had 20 minutes.
Right.
To finish it off, is there one thing that you would like to give to our listeners? Because I'll be broadcasting this interview in my radio show next week, which is going to be roughly around 10 days before you actually play in Berlin. So if there's one thing you could tell our listeners and fans, is there anything you would like to tell them?
Well, just, hey, we're kind of going to come there. We're going to get nasty. We're going to get loud. We're going to hurt people when we get there, so they better get ready.
Awesome. I cannot wait to see you guys at the gig. I'm going to be hopefully standing in the front row as well. And yeah, really, really looking forward to seeing you. Blackie, thank you once again very much for taking the time to speak to us. It was really, really cool to speak to you again after 15 years. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you on the 7th then here in Berlin.
Okay, Dax. Well, thank you for taking the time, buddy. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
All right. Take care now.
You too. Bye-bye.